The main protagonist of our story is George, a gentle giant from a neighborhood small grocery store. The first impression anyone can get of him is his smiling face and closed eyes, which just makes him a super likable and kind human. However, our George is actually the most messed up soul in the entire district, suffering from mental problems that are so serious that he is a walking time bomb. He suffers from constant paraphilic homicidal impulse disorder, severe compulsive homicidal urges, and intermittent explosive disorder. Basically, he always wants to kill, but his humanity gets in his way. His life completely changes when he comes across a very annoying problem that would change his life forever. The manga starts and we see our main protagonist George taking a regular order for his regular average customers, and like always he smiles. Then we learn the dark and gruesome past that he bears. When he was 15 years old, he did something inhumane to a girl that he had a massive crush on. After getting rejected, he kidnapped her and unalived her and did terrible and unspeakable things to her. He describes these moments as the most euphoric moment of his entire existence. For this heinous and devilish crime, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison, and these were the hardest years of his life. In the prison, all he could think about was his life being wasted, and for 20 years he cursed himself. His severe disorder wants him to kill and do terrible things to the bodies, and a majority of his head is already in love with these thoughts. He is a devil in a saint's body, barely living like an average human, trying to fit in with them. Even during his order, these thoughts would want him to kill, but he controls them by slicing and butchering the meat. Now he has been so careful with himself that he has not been around or with any human for years and lives in total isolation. Considering his terrible desires, he wants to spend the rest of his life alone and quietly until he dies. That day, it was raining like never before, and he was about to come across a problem. He goes outside to close the shop, but in front of him was a kid with tired and hollow eyes. She was totally lifeless in her eyes. What was more sad was that there were some evidence of things that most likely could have gone down with her. He kept staring at her for a second, and that little girl answers his question on whether she is feeling cold or not. She was shivering, and without any hesitation, she replies that she is cold. Understanding that he must help her, he lets her in for shelter and lets her use his bathroom. Now George, although a terrible human himself, this time he questions the sight that he saw earlier. That little girl's entire body was not okay, and there were some painful truths to it. He feels sorry for her, but from the side she calls to him and asks for any clothes. He gives her his own clothes, and obviously it wasn't even close to fitting her. She introduces herself as Alice, and George makes her comfortable by sharing to her about how her name totally suits her. He introduces himself as well and lets her know that since she is okay with meat, they can have dinner together. He serves her a perfectly cooked meat, and gently he lets her know to blow the hot steam before eating. As she eats, her face brightens up from the taste and she praises him for the food. As they both exchanged words with each other, it turned out Alice was 8 years old and George somehow was able to keep her entertained. Now, although she felt like an abnormal child, he remembers the bruises, and with a calm voice he asks whether her mother would be worried about her or not. Interrupting George, she lets him know that she would never be worried, and he asks if her father could be looking for her, and with a sad tone she lets him know that she doesn't have a father. Now the next thing that she said broke George. With a trembling voice she lets George know that whenever her mother comes home she would start to act differently with Alice and then scream at her that, "You should have never been born." Just hearing this, George remembers the words his parents said to him, and with a gentle voice he lets her know that he is very glad to meet her, and he is happy that she was born in this world. Hearing this, she starts to tear up and she requests him to help her just for this night. George's life was a battle, but she actually came in and helped him a lot. Just like this, he takes her to shopping, and to everyone else he introduces Alice as his niece. Alice wasn't really other to him at all, and he questions why he feels like Alice should be his daughter or something. As they decide on a beautiful outfit for her, George and Alice keep being together. He slowly starts to look after her and even gives her a hairpin. To him, she was a little lost soul, a perfect mirror of himself, and he couldn't help but feel a burden to leave her. He himself started to take care of her like he would do for his own offspring, and Alice herself was perfectly happy with this gentle giant. She just helped him realize that he could be a human as well. Just like this, instead of returning Alice to her abusive mother, George just begins to take care of her, and just like this, days passed and soon things were looking good. He returns back and the first thing that he sees ahead is Alice holding a drawing of George, and with a happy expression she lets him know that she drew him. Seeing this, he showers praises after praises and shouts off how good she is, and she ends up jumping and hugging him. At first, George was not sure of these feelings, but now he knows what he has been feeling. He wants to do anything to protect this child and shield her from the sadness and harshness of this world. As they become an inseparable duo of father and daughter, unfortunately the devils that were permanently inside him managed to sneak to him again, and one day he ends up expressing an outburst of bloodlust so strong that a normal human would give in. He ends up seeing a decoration of a head that he could have done, and immediately he opens his eyes and starts to breathe heavily. Once he realized what happened, he looks to his side and sees his daughter Alice, and the outburst goes absolutely nuts. His heart pumps so hard and so fast that his entire existence was ready to kill and satisfy his urges. That day, poor George fought with his demons all night long, and the next day he was ready to protect his daughter no matter what. He is an abnormal human and he can never change. He lets her know that both of them should go for a walk, and there he confesses that he will turn over Alice to the police. He walks with heavy steps and crying on how miserable his life was before she came to him, but he was ready to sever his tie to protect her. She kept talking to him like a happy soul, but once it started to rain, George was about to run to a nearby shop for an umbrella, but with a gentle and sweet voice, Alice lets George know that she doesn't really need any umbrella anymore. She looks at him and smiles and shares that ever since she met George she has not been cold at all, and even when the rain falls on her, she feels warm when she is with him. Hearing this, George takes a pause, but from the back a woman screams at Alice and calls out to her. When they both glanced back, Alice's abusive mother was standing there with a watery breath. This was the same lady that normally shopped at George's place, and when Alice saw her mother, all she could do was shiver like a terrified soul. Alice quickly hides behind George, and her mother begins to shout at her like she was ready to kill her. Alice tells her mother no, that she doesn't want to go back to her. Her mother snaps at George and glares at him for being a pervert and controlling her, but Alice this time musters the courage and glares at her own mother to stop badmouthing George. Now realizing that things are out of control, George lowers his head and began explaining on how she was sitting near the shop in the rain and he helped her. He shares that he wanted to return her back to her home, but Alice wanted to not go back at all and insisted on staying at the shop for some time. Although in a normal setting this is already a kidnapping and a serious case, he lowers his head and accepts all the punishment for this. As Alice began to tear up, he sits down and comforts that poor soul, lets her know that she needs to go back to her real parents and he can't really be with her. She sobs but listens to him, and as they both part ways, they cried, realizing that they won't be able to meet again. George tears up and cries to Alice to find happiness this way, but that poor soul was already about to suffer again. Once her mother realizes that they are far enough, she tightens her grip and stops right there in the rain. The next thing that she does is absolutely painful to mention. Her mother drags her tiny arm with every strength that she has and throws her to the wet, hard floor. As she cries, her mother snaps and screams on the top of her lungs on how worried she was and starts to insult her, but it was all followed up by brute stomping and kicks to her. As she cries in terror, her mother doesn't stop and kept taking out her frustration and anger on her. As she continues for several minutes and each blow more heavy, from the back Justice was waiting and George emerges from the back and knocks her mother out. We also get a few painful scenes of the life that Alice lived, all this life of pure terror, pain and misery, always locked and not fed at all. Her low-life mother opens her eyes and sees a bolt cutter staring right next to her holding a knife, and she quickly understands what was about to happen to her. George goes crazy and he begins to, do his terrifying things, and as she screamed, he showed no remorse or sadness. Rather, he laughed on how unfair life is for some kids and how they end up getting the worst trash possible as their guardians for life. Now George becomes a devil himself and does unspeakable things over and over, until his eyes cover in tears from realizing that he is truly a monster and can't protect Alice like this, but what he can do is eliminate all the threats to her. As she passes out from pain and then reawakens, once the nightmare was over, George sits down near the table and lowers his head after doing something that not even I would like to describe. Right after this, he stands up and walks to the nearby police station, and as always, the policeman greets him, but he interrupts and lets that man know that he is a murderer and wants to turn himself in. He explains and confesses all the things that he did, from kidnapping and sheltering a little kid whom he thought of as a daughter to killing her abusive and aggressive mother. He lets the police officer know that he has left the murder scene as it is. And just like this, the brutal killing turns into a national headline, and almost everyone questioned his behavior and the things he did. George was dubbed the Butcher for his acts, and the list of crimes he was to be punished for was long and dark. His punishment was the death penalty. Sitting there, reflecting on what he did, he was somewhat happy to finally escape the instant battles that he was fighting all his life. But still, he remembered the absolutely terrified and sad face of Alice, and he thanks her for all the happy memories that she gave him. He reminds himself that he is ready for the punishment. Serving there, he also starts to request a few things from the warden to pass the time, but when he requests a paper and pencil, truly all he could really do was draw his daughter and the person he cared for. Just like this, 10 years go by, and in a prison art museum, Alice, wearing the same hairpin that George gave her, she walks around the place, and her attention was grabbed by a painting from a man called Zanuf. When she looks at it, she stares at it with disbelieving eyes, and quickly tears began to overflow. It was a painting from George, and he had drawn Alice perfectly, finally completing one of his promises with her, of drawing her as well. George's last day on Earth was coming close, but he ends up getting a visitor notice, and when he hears the word Alice, he jumps in disbelief, and then he is led to the place. He shakes like crazy and questions if she hated and resented him for doing the terrible crime. When he is led into the meeting area, both start to tear up like crazy, and all George could say was how she had grown so much. As they began to talk, he shares on how he regrets the past 10 years and the things he did, and she shares her side of the story on how she has been managing well and facing hardship with an upright attitude and determination. As tears covered her face, she smiles at him and thanked him for freeing her and teaching her about love. She cries and tells him that she was glad that he was born, and George quickly tears up himself, realizing that despite his natural flaws, there was still one person in his life that was thankful for his existence. As they both talked for some time, he lets her know that it was his life's greatest joy to draw her, but from the back the warden knocks on the door and reminds George that his time is up. As Alice gets up herself, she smiles and lets him know that she would visit him again, and instead of telling her the truth, he thanks her and they part ways. As he leaves, the warden asks him if he would like to have something special as his last meal, and George, with a cheerful and satisfied tone, lets him know that he has been craving for hamburger steak.
Hello guys, this is Ken. Thanks for being here. I want to announce that I have a new animation channel where we will talk about interesting stuff and animate a lot of blood, death, and a bit of gore. As of right now, the channel is almost non-existent, so please help me to continue by following it. You can wait until the end of this video and click the link in the center, or go to the comment section and check the first comment there. You will also be able to find the link to this channel on the front page of my channel, and lastly, the description will now always have the link to the channel. Please help me continue this awesome and fun journey, and I would love to do this with you all.